Mary Jones of Toxics Action Center, and after that, Lori Nearing and Jeffrey Cutter.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Jones. I'm the community organizer at Toxics Action Center based in Western Massachusetts, but supporting our work on PFAS all across the state. At Toxics Action Center, we believe that everyone has the right to clean air and clean water, and that we work side by side with communities to make sure that they get those rights put in place. From working with communities that have been contaminated by PFAS, I have seen firsthand the toll that these chemicals have taken on places like Westfield and Barnstable. Our primary motivation in submitting this petition is to safeguard public health for the people of Massachusetts and to protect our right to clean water. To do that, the state must address PFAS as a class of chemicals. As you may know, exposure to PFAS through drinking water, even in incredibly small quantities, has been linked to adverse health impacts such as reproductive cancers, kidney disorders, and autoimmune diseases, just to name a few. As our knowledge as PFAS as a class expands, the scientific community is finding health effects at lower and lower exposure levels and consistently across this class of chemicals. Basically, the more we know about PFAS, the worse we understand this entire class to be. We see this treatment technique as a promising way to get on top of addressing PFAS as a class, get in front of this public health emergency, and protect clean drinking water in the Commonwealth. This treatment technique, based on PFAS as a class, would require public water systems install best available technologies or utilize safe water supply alternatives where overall PFAS levels are found unsafe. Mass DEP should set a treatment technique drinking water standard that will limit PFAS exposure to health protective levels, including for those that are very young, infants and children, and most vulnerable populations. We are suggesting 1 part per trillion. Adopting a treatment technique standard is an opportunity for Mass DEP to maximize its impact, as it would streamline its regulatory response to PFAS as a class and get clean water to affected communities as fast as possible. The state of Massachusetts needs strong regulations to spur more testing for PFAS across the state, because we know communities like Barnstable, Ayer, Westfield, Devens, and recently Martha's Vineyard are just the tip of the iceberg. We know that this dangerous class of chemicals has been released from manufacturing facilities, used in fire trainings, and dumped in landfills all across Massachusetts for decades. Once released, PFAS are extremely persistent in the environment, and they accumulate in the human body. The time to act is now. This is why I'm asking Mass DEP to move forward on establishing a treatment technique drinking water standard for PFAS as a class. Alternatively, Mass DEP should immediately start the process of setting an MCL for PFAS as a class. I want to close by saying that this petition, which is about proactively finding and treating PFAS contamination to stop exposure to these chemicals, is just 1 step in rectifying this crisis. We also need Mass DEP's vigilance to stop the continued release of PFAS in the environment, and for Mass DEP to work with other agencies and impacted communities to find relief from harm already caused by these chemicals and justice for lives we have already lost from PFAS. Thank you. Someone was going to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Next we have Lori Nearing, people of Ayer concerned about the environment, and after Lori, Jeffrey Cutter, my apologies, of AgriSource, and then Kristen Mello.
Good morning. My name is Lori Nearing. I'm a resident of the town of Ayer, and I'm here, as you just said, representing the people of Ayer concerned about the environment. PACE is a local environmental watchdog group. We've been focusing on environmental risks in the small town of Ayer, and we've mainly been looking at issues of Fort Devens, the former Fort Devens, which is a Superfund site. And we agree with what the petitioners have said. And one thing that I want to, I'm kind of going off my script here, I want to state is that we have been focusing oftentimes on the synergistic effects of chemicals that we are all exposed to, which means that when we do these various studies, we're always looking at 1 chemical exposure at a time, in this case, perhaps a class. We don't know, and we can't possibly know what the effects are of being exposed to things in combination with other things. A little bit of this, a little bit of that, all combined with something that's below the MCLs, we don't know what the human effects are. And so we definitely support treatment systems for these chemicals. So I'm here today because we believe we urgently need Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to establish an enforceable standard for addressing the entire class of PFAS substances, which threaten drinking water supplies all over the Commonwealth. This is far more effective than an interim guidance value established by the DEP Research and Standards, which recommends limiting a combination of 5 of the PFAS chemicals to a total of 70 ppt. That number is helpful, but it has no teeth. It does not address the constant flow of newly invented forms of PFASs used in industry, which could be synergistic, as I just said. We urgently need a legally binding standard that towns can depend upon and plan around, and citizens can use to bring suit, if need be, to force protective measures to be taken in their towns. And I'd like to provide just a little bit of background of our situation. For a little more than 22 years, PACE's primary effort and focus has been in overseeing the environmental remediation project at the former Fort Devens, a Superfund site, which directly abuts and impacts my town. I have at home, I have the bookshelves just overflowing with copies of all the reports that I get. They're all circular reports, and we literally put an addition on our house to accommodate all these reports. And they address the groundwater soil contamination, arsenic, lead, TCE from dry cleaning solvent from the parachutes that used to be cleaned, numerous dumps, accidental spills, and firefighting and fires. Unfortunately, both the Air DPW and Devens have detected PFASs in the raw drinking water that exceeds the current EPA advisory limit of 70. So now we must also deal with the impacts of these substances in our drinking water. We know that the source of these PFASs is from the former Fort Devens. They were released into the soil and groundwater mostly as a result of the use of firefighting foam at Fort Devens during process sessions and during actual fires. There was a very large warehouse fire not far from our wellhead on Devens. Because it travels easily in groundwater, it reached our wellheads. At Grove Pond wells in air, DPW found 490 part per trillion PPTs. At the McPherson well in Devens, it was above 4,000 PPT. A level of 39,000 PPT was found at a monitoring well at the Moore Army Airfield training area. And I also did a little research just last night. The Devens fire station is about, I measured it to be about 2,000 feet from our Grove Pond wellhead, well within the Zone 2 protection area. And they did a lot of firefighting practice behind the fire station. And at that site, they found a number of 4,100 parts per trillion, and this is heading toward our drinking water supply. As a temporary fix, both Air and Devens have had to shut down highly productive wells. Last spring, Air residents voted to install a $4.2 million water treatment system to remove PFASs as a long-term solution. And this, by the way, was a unanimous vote at our town meeting, which I think demonstrates how important it is for our citizens to have clean and healthy water supplies, being very proactive. Currently, our DPW superintendent, who is here today, and Board of Selectmen are in the process of designing a very complex water treatment system with the design criteria based on 20 parts per trillion treatment goal with a goal of targeting 5 carbon long chains of PFASs. However, because the unclear and evolving requirements from EPA and Mass DEP, this process is pretty stressful. There's an urgency in getting the treatment plant up and running, but there's a lack of clarity on what that cleanup standard should be. The public health and financial impacts of any future rule changes on air, and indeed every community in the Commonwealth, are really significant. My group, PACE, has studied the US EPA Drinking Water Health Advisory for PFAS. We believe it is not sufficient. An advisory is not enforceable and does not allow the polluter to be held as a responsible party. Case in point, in August of 2018, the Secretary of Defense from DOD submitted a response letter to the New England Regional EPA Administrator about Air and Devon's PFAS contamination. It stated that AIR's actions were, quote, voluntary, and that EPA guidance is, quote, non-binding. The DOT Secretary stated, quote, while we understand it is EPA's preference that the Army provide funding to support the voluntary actions taken by Air and Devon's water systems, even though the finished water is below the LHA, DOD must follow existing laws and regulations that govern our funding and activities. DOD does not have authority to fund the water system's actions until a need for remedial action is established under CERCLA. So we get ourselves into this loop. Mass DEP's Office of Research and Standards for the interim toxicity and drinking water guidance values for PFASs has recommended a more conservative value than EPA's, combining the values of 5 significant PFASs together in any combination. Their sum concentration should be less than 70 ppt. As we have stated, the guidance value needs to become enforceable. In addition, we must consider that today there are more than 3,000 PFAS compounds, with more being invented every year. We agree with the petitioners that the family of all PFAS compounds must be considered together as a sum total. Since they are chemically similar, we should assume that they have similar toxic effects on humans. And I know that in Europe and other places, you must prove that a chemical is safe before it can be released. And we seem to do things backwards here. We have to prove, we put it out there, and then we have to prove that it's not safe before we take it off the market. And that's just backwards. We urgently need Mass DEP to establish an MCL for the entire family of related PFAS substances found in drinking water as the most effective and efficient long-term solution. Many other states and other countries have already established legal exposure limits. We cannot wait for the federal government to resolve this issue. It will take forever. We respectfully request that this become a key priority for your department. In closing, I want to express our sincere appreciation for the support from Commissioner Martin Suberg in working with the Army and EPA Region 1 to address PFAS contamination issues in air. We recognize that this is pretty complicated, and we appreciate the hard work that's being done by everyone in the department. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Jeffrey Cooter, pardon me, of AgriSource, and after that, Kristen Mello, Diane Cotter, and Philip Rapp.
Should I hold it? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm actually here wearing 3 hats. I'm a resident of Massachusetts. I drink water from a public water supply, as does my family, my children, and my grandchild. I'm also here as a representative of the Northeast Biosolids and Residuals Association, NEBRA. We are a 501c3 professional association that was created to advance environmentally sound recycling of biosolids and other organic residuals. Our membership includes the environmental professionals and organizations that produce, treat, test, consult on, and manage most of the region's biosolids and other organic residuals, such as food waste and paper sludges. We share CFL's petition's concerns about protecting drinking water quality and public health. However, as some of the earlier speakers, we have some significant disagreements with the petition in a number of areas. First off, we do not see this as an urgent public health concern. Given the phase out of 2 of the most ubiquitous and concerning PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS, the threats posed by PFAS are diminishing. Data that has been compiled by federal agencies and states show declining levels of PFOA and PFOS in human blood serum, in wastewater, and other matrices. It is very likely that peak human exposures to at least these 2 chemicals are in the past. Furthermore, we see no urgency in bypassing the usual process of establishing MCLs for PFAS compounds. consideration must be given to the technical and economic issues that result from establishing regulatory limits. We have noted also that there is an ongoing debate about the toxicity of various PFAS chemicals, and there is no consensus in the scientific community about toxicity of many of the compounds. We disagree with the petition's recommendation of immediately setting a PFAS drinking water limit at 20 parts per trillion for the combination of 5 compounds. Among the various PFAS chemicals, there are significant differences in human half-lives, persistence, bioaccumulation, and other key parameters that must be considered. Lumping together all PFAS compounds may be easy, may be convenient, but is not scientifically justifiable. We urge that the DEP and other stakeholders put emphasis and take actions on source reductions and controls on the uses of all persistent chemicals of concern. We particularly applaud DEP's efforts to remove firefighting foams, which appear to be a major source of contamination of drinking water. Although uses of chemicals of proven public health concern is, avoiding uses of chemicals of proven public health concern is the most cost-efficient way of reducing risk to public health, protecting drinking water, and protecting wastewater and our environment.